Number 5 on this list is a mistake. So I know that's kind of weird. How do you discover a mistake? Well, in a story from One Dumb Diver, and yeah, that is their actual handle, they do just that. They write, "When I was 15, I took the family boat out and dove the reef myself to clear my head. That was mistake number 1. I was down at a depth of about 90 feet when I was only rated for 60. While diving, I spotted a 3.5 meter mako shark coming right at me. For those who are unaware, makos are basically the cheetahs of the ocean, and they only have 2 speeds. Curious, which is harmless, and lunch. This guy was in lunch mode, so I hovered, as I'd been trained to do since there was no way for me to escape it. Nowadays, we dive with shark shields which emit electronic pulses that freak the sharks out and keep them away, but back then, what we used was essentially a chainmail sleeve, the idea being that sharks hate the taste of metal, so if you give it your arm, it'll bite down, decide you're gross, and move along. So I wait, and it comes, and I make a perfect move to give it my arm. However, just before the crunch, it occurred to me that I'd left my sleeve on my bed. I had my knife drawn, however now I had a series of problems. I had a huge open gashing wound on my arm from the bite in open water and trailed blood everywhere. Once the shock wore off, you realize that you're in salt water, and salt water and open wounds, they don't feel too good. In a panic, I dropped my weight belt and shot up to the surface without any sort of waiting period. Because I hadn't been paying attention to the currents, I was approximately a quarter mile downstream of my boat, which means I had to swim up to it. So I end up racing back to shore with nothing more than a tourniquet to staunch the bleeding. Long story short, my series of unfortunate self-inflicted events earned me 172 stitches, boatloads of physical therapy because the shark had actually bitten down into my tricep and detached it, and easily identifiable scars on one of my arms for the rest of my life. So that story right there, folks, is why I personally don't think I'm ever going deep sea diving. I love sharks, they're super cool, I love to learn about sharks, but I am more than happy to keep them in a tank at the aquarium and learn about them in that way. Swimming with them or discovering one in front of you on the day that you also forgot your protective gear, not something that sounds like a great time. Number 4 on this list is a barracuda. El Herrera 9519 writes, "One time when my parents visited Mexico, they went diving and my mom was slightly lower down than my dad, looking at the ocean floor. My mom had on a gold necklace that was floating in the water around her. It was a sunny day and a fairly shallow dive, so it was sparkling. My mom looked below at all the critters when my dad grabbed her and started frantically shaking her arm to get her attention. She looked up, and a barracuda was directly in front of her, staring intently at the shiny necklace. She slowly moved up her hand to cover the necklace, and then slowly and calmly moved away from it, and it took off without bothering them anymore, but still pretty unsettling, and taught my mom to be a little bit more aware of her surroundings when diving." So I looked it up, and barracudas can grow to be 1.8 meters in length. Pair that with their extremely sharp teeth and the fact that shiny objects remind them of the little silverfish that they eat, and you have yourself in a pretty bad situation. The woman in this story is honestly extremely lucky that this fish waited to decide if it was going to attack or not. Most times she wouldn't have had time to respond, and it would have just gone to take a bite. Considering this necklace would have been around her neck, having a barracuda bite into it could have ended very badly.
Number 3, bulldog fish. Catfish, wolverine fish, now bulldog fish. When are we just gonna have a fish, you know? The bulldog fish, or the Xenactinus oryx. That sounds like a Decepticon, doesn't it? Xenactinus oryx? Roll out. Well, it's Autobots. Never mind. This thing can truly teach a new dog some old tricks. Like 90 million years old tricks, because our newest discovery is actually a really old one. Extinct, thankfully. You wouldn't want to haul this thing up in your net. The Dino of the Week blog states that some of the longest bulldog fish ever may have once even measured up to 6 meters long. Yeah, that's like a regular sized shark. The bulldog fish fossils may be quite valuable as well. A fully intact, complete framed specimen sold for about $110,000 at Sotheby's auction house. Is this the reason fish and chips are so expensive nowadays? Like, what's going on here? This scary dude roamed the warm, shallow waters of the Western Interior Seaway that split America in 2 halves during the Upper Cretaceous period. Distinguished by their heavy, bony skull and armed to the tooth with teeth like a nightmare, last year, Andy Moore, a local fisherman, made a discovery while taking part in a fishing competition in Nebraska. When he brought his kayak over to free his line, he first thought that it was a skeleton of something that had recently died, so he just returned back to his tournament. He contacted the sheriff's department after the tournament, worried, and they got back to him saying it was his lucky day. Dude, imagine just reeling in a 90 million year old fish during a fishing tournament. Like, I hope he won. That's definitely first place, isn't it? Oh, Andy? Oh yeah, caught a 90 millioner. Yeah. Number 2, the barrel eye fish. Tubular eyes, bro. No, seriously, your tubular eyes actually are very rare and also significantly puzzling. Say hello to the barrel eye fish, or the Macropina microstoma from the Opisthoproctus species, meaning backwards in Greek, to signify their uniquely designed flipped up eyes luminously inside, alive in their head, or backwards. Generally directed upwards and back to detect the silhouettes of both predator and prey, although they can move their eyes back to forward. Basically, they have a sunroof above their head that they can look up from inside their own head. Hey, that's pretty tubular, bruh. They can be found deep in tropical waters in the twilight zone, between 600 and 800 meters down. There are fish that gaze upwards through their transparent heads with eyes like mesmerizing emerald orbs. These domes are huge spherical lenses that sit on a pair of long silvery eye tubes, hence its common name. The barrel eye fish has a green tint over their eyes, which even acts as kind of like a sunglasses to help them track down prey in any sort of lighting. There is literally nowhere to hide, even for a bioluminescent fish. Barrel eyes are one step ahead the entire time. After years of only seeing dead, net-caught specimens, in 2021, Bruce Robinson with the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute in California and their high-def cameras finally got a pretty good look at these dudes using remotely operated vehicles. Dude, these are apparently really rare. Side note, is this how fish are evolving? Like their heads are becoming see-through all of a sudden? Because this is terrifying. Like, imagine a shark with a sunroof. Number 1, the snapping shrimp. This little guy, the snapping shrimp, aka the pistol shrimp, aka mussel in the alphidae family. Sounds like a mafia family, doesn't it? Hey, I'm a pistol shrimp with the alphidae family, who's asking? This little thing can literally create a sonic boom under the water right before and as it's attacking you. That's not scary at all. It's so fast you literally don't even know what's happening due to the stun alone and how fast it is. You won't see it coming, you might hear it coming. This thing's sound is that big, it creates a sonic boom. We know nothing, Jon Snow. Like, they're apparently found in coral reefs and oyster reefs. These pistol shrimp hit their prey at over 100 kilometers per hour. In doing so, a large air bubble is created, and because of this Mike Tyson shrimp is so quick with the jab, the following pop is around 200 decibels. It has a punching hand and a claw hand, like a jab and a cross. The sound stuns their prey first and resembles sticks breaking or cracking of a knuckle under the water. But don't panic, not in any lakes or freshwater, they live in tropical seas. They're usually muddy green or orange in color, usually only about that big. Scientists found that actual light is produced when the bubble pops due to the high temperature and pressure under the water. They're the only ones so far that can do this. I mean, this is pretty sick. And also pretty terrifying. The knowledge that fish are starting to learn how to flashbang other fish like they're clearing a room in Call of Duty, dude, that's where I draw the line. I'm not going swimming anymore at all.
Number 5 on this list is a giant eel. This is a true story that comes in from a Reddit user, RCMW181. They write, an old World War II ammunition ship off the south coast of England was full of brass-topped shells. Most had been taken by divers over the years, and it was now very rare to see them, apart from a pile in one corner of the ship. The pile of shiny brass metals was miraculously untouched and remarkably clean after spending years underwater, and you only found out why if you swam near them. Out of the murky darkness, the largest eel I have ever seen snakes forward. Without exaggeration, this thing had a head the same size as a horse's head full of jagged teeth. I could not see the body as it looped into the dark and deeper into the ship. No one got near those shells. Turns out for years this thing had been guarding the shiny brass shells, slithering over them, making them shine. We found out at a bar later that he was famous in the area and many people went to the wreck just to see him. No idea why this giant creature was guarding them like a dragon and its horde, but some said eels are like magpies and like shiny things. There are multiple scary discoveries in this story in my opinion. First off, a Reddit user just glosses over the fact that they're in a sunken World War II munitions ship. They don't say so, but I would have imagined that people would have died on that ship when it sunk, and there may have even been some remains of the dead still down there. Then to come face to face with a giant eel that is extremely protective over these brass shells would be terrifying. If that was a giant moray eel, then those creatures can grow up to 2.5 meters in length and can be very deadly in the water. Had that creature interpreted what our diver was doing as threatening, then they may not have made it to shore later that day to be able to share the story. Number 4 on this list is a freezer. This story from a Reddit user is just all kinds of creepy. Count_Dynamo writes, I've done a number of dives, and the strangest thing I ever saw was a large deep freezer with a heavy industrial chain wrapped around multiple times with about 5 cinder blocks attached. It was very rusted, and the deep freezer itself had to have been 30 years old, probably more. This was about 90 feet just off of Vancouver Island, Canada. The situation gave myself and the other divers the heebie-jeebies. Logged the GPS and depth coordinates and notified the police. We were able to find out what was inside since one of the divers had friends with the local police. 10 porcelain dolls. Now for starters, I'm actually kind of happy that they found porcelain dolls inside that freezer, because when I was initially reading that story and heard about a freezer that was locked up and weighed down, I initially thought of a dead body, but having 10 porcelain dolls raises a lot of questions. Were these dolls potentially cursed and that was the only way to get rid of them? If you've ever come in contact with a cursed doll, then locking it up is the first thing to do. Ed and Lorraine prove it with their handling of the Annabelle doll. If these dolls are cursed though, then this discovery gets even more scary. Clearly, whoever locked them in that freezer threw them to the bottom of the ocean and didn't want them to be found. Bringing them back up to the surface probably wasn't the best idea. Number 3 on this list is the proboscis worm. I don't care what anyone says, this has to be a monster. Just based on literally how freaking gross it is, it needs to be qualified as a monster. This species is also known as ribbon worms, and there are actually a ton of ribbon worms in the world. The ones I'm talking about reside deep at the bottom of the ocean. These ones usually grow to be bigger than the other ones in the world. The Smithsonian Magazine says the largest species of ribbon worm is the bootlace worm, which can be found writhing among rocks in the waters of the North Sea. Not only is it the largest nemertean, but it may also be the longest animal on the planet. Uncertainty remains because these stretchy worms are difficult to accurately measure, but they have been found at lengths of over 30 meters and are believed to even grow as long as 60 meters longer than the blue whale. Despite their length, they are less than an inch around. Now these creatures don't have any natural predators, and let me tell you why. Because they look disgusting. Like, let me ask you guys, would you want to eat that? I would straight up need to be starving, and there would literally need to be nothing edible left on the planet other than this thing before I decide to take a bite. It literally looks like a large intestine that just slithers across the bottom of the ocean. Shockingly enough, this is a real thing though, and you can find it chilling in deep waters. Number 2 on this list is zombie worms. We aren't quite done with the worm talk yet, guys, because now we have got to look at zombie worms. Zombies are a pretty terrifying monster, so are these just like them? The Smithsonian says zombie worms don't crave brains, instead they seek bones. The 1 to 3 inch Osedax worms were first discovered in the bones of a rotting gray whale on the deep sea floor nearly 10,000 feet deep in 2002. Since then, more Osedax species have been discovered. There are 26 according to the World Register of Marine Species. Zombie worms don't eat mineral bones directly, instead they digest fats within the bone. However, their style of eating is quite different from ours because they don't have a mouth or a stomach. They secrete an acid from their skin that dissolves bone, freeing up the fat and protein trapped inside. Then, symbiotic bacteria living in the worm's body digests the fat and protein. How Osedax acquire nutrients from the bacteria isn't known. They may simply digest the bacteria, or nutrients are somehow transferred to the worm. They hold on to whatever bones they can find by drilling in with roots which contain the symbiotic bacteria. Zombie worms can retract these plumes into the body when they are disturbed. If all this isn't strange enough, the only worms doing any drilling are female. The microscopic males live inside their bodies. One study counted 111 males inside just one female zombie worm. This eliminates the pesky step of having to search for a mate because the eggs and sperm are right next to each other. Then the worms can disperse many fertilized eggs far and wide, hoping that they land near some recently fallen bones. Needless to say, but these are some weird freaking creatures. No wonder we've nicknamed them zombie worms. They're about as monstrous as you could possibly get. Not to mention, but they feast on the bodies and bones of the dead, similarly to what zombies would want to be doing. Number 1 on this list is the Sloane's viperfish. As with most things on this list, we have a thoroughly disgusting looking creature. This thing is just as dangerous as it is disgusting though. The Twilight Zone says, like many of the inhabitants of the deep sea, Sloane's viperfish sport light-producing organs called photophores along its body. These flashing blue, green, or yellow lights might attract tasty snacks, but they're most useful for masking the fish's silhouette from predators below. They're also useful for grabbing a meal. When prey comes near, the viperfish drops a glowing light on its dorsal fin ray like a fishing lure in front of its mouth and snap. A muscular jaw filled with clear, sharp teeth comes crashing down like a guillotine. Lucky for the viperfish, its first vertebrae has evolved to act as a shock absorber for that powerful bite. This is the deep sea version of a piranha, except way more deadly. If you were getting attacked by piranhas, there would likely need to be multiple of them to attack you to actually win. I could totally see a world though where you lose one-on-one versus this thing though. Its teeth would literally dig so deep in your body. Even at the thickest part of your body, this thing has the potential to go all the way through if it bites you well enough. Thank goodness it's swimming thousands of meters below us and we don't need to worry about it popping up on our next snorkeling adventure.
Coming in at number 5, we have the narwhal tusk. If any of you have ever seen the movie Elf, then you're familiar with the cute narwhal in the beginning of the movie, and that movie really brought narwhals to the public's attention and making this sea creature more popular than ever before, but so much about this creature is a mystery. In 1577, the English explorer Martin Frobisher led an expedition of 150 men to the northern Canada in search of gold, but they had come across something they had never intended, and that was the sea unicorn. The myth of the unicorn goes back centuries, and the business of unicorn horn trade was sustained through the Middle Ages and Renaissance by Vikings who killed the so-called sea unicorns, cut off their horns and sold them for an astronomical price. As European naturalists became more familiar with the world's animal, the myth of the unicorn faded, but mystery of the sea unicorn continued. Frobisher's discovery was actually what we know today as the narwhal, but the horn itself continues to be speculated by many. But the horn is apparently not a horn at all, but is a tooth. The relatives of narwhals include species like the beluga whales, orcas, and dolphins, but the mystery remains of how did this massive freakish tooth evolve in this one specific species after its ancestors branched off from whales with ordinary teeth. Many scientists and researchers debate about what this tooth is used for, and some suggest it's an acoustic probe, a rudder, an ice picker, or a spear for battling predators. These creatures don't make it easy for researchers to see them use their tusk for anything at all, so it makes many people continue to question it. Many have come up with many different theories about this so-called horn and what they use it for and why they have it. It has created a huge debate between researchers and scientists to this day, but no definite answer has come out to this day. In at number 4, we have the submarine disappearances in 1968. This is one giant mysterious situation, which is the disappearance of 4 submarines from 4 different countries in 1968. The USS Scorpion, a Soviet submarine K-129, a French submarine Minerve, and the INS Dwarka went inexplicably missing over just a 5-month period, and the last 2 disappearing only 4 days apart. The exact causes of these sinkings remain unknown and remain a mystery over 50 years later. The INS Dwarka was scheduled to arrive in Israel on January 29, 1968. When it didn't return, searchers went out to find it, but after a while there was no sign of the missing submarine. So the search ended on February 4th, and the 69-man crew was officially declared dead in 1981. The cause of the sinking was never determined, and theories say that either a mechanical or human error caused a catastrophic accident, or that the submarine snorkel was damaged after hitting another ship, causing it to flood. The Minerve was on the training operation in the Mediterranean on January 27, 1968, and when they were on their way home, the men were caught in a bad storm. When it was 30 miles away from the port, the Minerve made contact contact with the men on land and said it would port in about an hour, but an hour came and went and the submarine had never returned. A frantic search was conducted with 20 vessels and aircrafts trying to locate the Minerve, but it was eventually called off on February 2nd when they found nothing. The K-129 with a crew of 98 descended on March 8, 1968, and almost 2 weeks into patrol on the North Pacific, the K-129 failed to send a scheduled radio message. The Soviets soon began a frantic search, and after 2 months of no sign of the submarine, they gave up their search. The cause of the ship sinking remains unknown and will likely never be known. Almost 3 months after the K-129, the USS Scorpion, a nuclear-powered attack submarine with a crew of 99 men, went missing in the Atlantic while on its way back from a patrol in the Mediterranean. It was sent out on February 15, 1968, and toward the end of its patrol, it radioed that it was expected to return on May 27th. But as you can guess, the USS Scorpion would never return. Like the others, many searched for the lost ship, but on June 5th, the Scorpion and its crew were declared presumed lost. Over the years, there have been multiple searches for these submarines, but only parts have been recovered, and it's considered one of the biggest mysteries that happened in the sea. No one knows why so many went missing in such a short amount of time, how exactly they went missing for so long, and what exactly made these vessels disappear. And this is a mystery we may never get the answer to.
Next up at number 3, the fire ship of Baie de Chaleur. Which, I mean, come on guys, that's probably the most awesome sounding title to anything on these historical lists, right? The fire ship of Baie de Chaleur sounds like something that Geralt of Rivia himself would sail down to Skellig after a summer in Toussaint, but whatever, that's by the by, because this vessel in question actually takes us over to the eternally autumnal eastern tones of New Brunswick, Canada. Now, the fire ship of Baie de Chaleur is also more commonly referred to as the Chaleur Phantom or the Phantom Ship, and it often takes the form of a series of ghost lights just before a storm, appearing as a large 3-mast galley. Now, the actual mechanics of this phenomenon are dubiously debated, and many believe it's caused to be down to either the weather phenomenon of St. Elmo's fire or an undersea release of natural gas after a patch of rotting vegetation just off the New Brunswick coast. I mean, that's a completely different story entirely, but what we're concerned with is the actual origin of the fire ship, the history of which is equal parts tragic and gruesome. As the legend goes, back in 1501, a Portuguese captain had spent a year pillaging the coast of Baie de Chaleur, capturing Mi'kmaq natives for the slave trade. However, his cutthroat agenda was miscalculated, as a year later, when he returned to the region on his second voyage, he was captured, tortured, and killed by the Mi'kmaq people in revenge for their kidnapped tribesmen. The legend didn't end there though, because a year later, the brother of the Portuguese captain sailed to the bay in search of his missing sibling, and upon seeing the same flags, the Mi'kmaq people attacked the ship, setting it ablaze whilst it was moored in the bay. Cut off, burning, and with certain death facing them, the sailors swore to haunt the bay for 1,000 years as their blazing fire ship sank into the Bay of Chaleur. Now, whilst later both Mi'kmaq and Portuguese casualties washed up on the shores of the island, the bay itself is said to be haunted by those that perished, often appearing as distraught sailors and warriors, their flesh burnt by the fire ship. Swinging in at number 2, the Princess Augusta. And on the topic of ghostly phenomenon, this particular apparition is perhaps one of the most well documented ghost ships of the 18th century, although the actual history behind it is shrouded in intrigue. Although the folklore account of this particular vessel is based upon the historical wreck of the Princess Augusta, a ship that sailed out of Rotterdam in August 1738 under the command of Captain George Long, in more modern records it is commonly referred to as the Palatine, where the Palatine Light, the apparition in question, famously gets its name. And the reason for that is down to the nature of the ship. Alongside 14 of his crew, Captain Long's directive was to transport 240 German immigrants from the Palatinate region of the Rhineland to build a new life for themselves in Philadelphia. However, we know that this is the tale of a ghost ship, and from the offset, their vessel was afflicted with some terribly tragic luck. Not long after passing through the Atlantic, the Princess Augusta's water supply was contaminated, causing a fever and flux to spread through the ship, killing 200 of its passengers, half the crew, and the captain himself. The ship's first mate, Andrew Brooke, quickly took command as the survivors leapt out of the frying pan and into the fire, getting hit by severe storms that pushed the ship far off course to the north. They then endured 3 months of extreme weather and dwindling supplies, when eventually they emerged shipwrecked in Block island not far from Rhode Island. Here the tale splits, but one thing is certain: Andrew Brooke, the first mate and commanding captain, took what remained of his crew and rowed ashore without once looking back at the cursed ship. It is said that some of the passengers survived, aided by the Block Islanders, but little to nothing is known about those that survived the entire voyage. As the legend goes, the Princess Augusta was set alight from the coast in the dead of night, pushed out to sea to burn and then disappear. At night, they say that if you listen closely, you can hear the screams of those that didn't make it back to shore. And finally, coming in at our number one spot, the Duke of Danzig. And for our most terrifying ghost ship on this list, of course it has to be a brutal and bloodthirsty pirate ship, a privateer that plundered her way across the Caribbean, notoriously in the name of her royal namesake, the Duke of Danzig. This ship's seafaring career was relatively quiet for the first few years of service, mainly acting as more of a letter of marque, a deterrent more so than a private man of war. However, her fate quickly changed after changing command and sailing under the French captain Francois Aregnadoux. Now, his intentions were to sail and plunder his way across the seven seas, and plunder he did from Liverpool to Barbados, capturing and scuttling more ships than he could count on his way. However, despite being a vessel of the French Empire, strangely enough, sometime after late June 1812, the Duke of Danzig just disappeared, although there are several records catching a glimpse of her around Canada, but she was never seen again. After the last mention of her, it was thought that she'd been destroyed by a tropical cyclone or sunk in the night after an encounter with a British frigate. However, as the legend goes, that was not the last of the Duke of Danzig. After the golden age of piracy had been sated, a captain by the name of Napoleon Gallois relayed his records of a French frigate encountering the wreck of the Duke of Danzig drifting listlessly at sea. As his crew witnessed, the ship itself was covered from helm to hull in dried blood, and in staggered rows were the putrefying corpses of her crew, many of which were brutally crucified to the masts or the deck. Strangely enough, there were no signs that she had been in recent battle. In fact, despite the blood, she was pristine, no shot holes, and her sails and rigging intact. After searching the ship, Gallois' crew found a stack of blood-stained papers identifying the captain as the same Francois Aregnadoux. And then, as they left, the crew of the frigate set the brig ablaze, forever to be buried at sea, along with her mystery.
Number 5, Wolverine Fish. Hugh Jackman, if you're watching this and you like scary stuff, this first one's for you, my dude. In 2021, there were more than 200 new species of just freshwater fish discovered alone. Just freshwater. Hopefully Cistrus wolverine. Okay, that's a pretty badass name. And a badass looking fish. There's no way in hell I'm taking that thing off of a hook with my hands. Are you kidding me? And you wouldn't want to either, because these fishes have strong lateral curved spikes called endontus tucked underneath their gills, which at any time they can extend and jab at their prey with these spiky prong-like claws, hence the name. For those of you who don't know Wolverine, he's an X-Men with claws. It kind of goes hand in hand here, you know? The Wolverine fish is actually a catfish, however, that grows up to only about 6 or 7 inches long. They get their name from both the barbed razor-sharp prongs associated with them and the temper and aggression inside of them. Yeah, so like full-blown Wolverine-style anger. Luckily for us, they live in between rocks found so far in the Brazilian river of Rio Xingu in the lower Amazon that I don't think you're gonna swim into any one of these soon. I feel like that's where the scariest fish are, the Amazon. Also, kind of confusing biologists, so many species and names alike but not alike. Catfish, wolf fish, half wolf, half man, X-Men fish. Like every day there's a new fish. Wolverine fish are only herbivores and graze on algae and detritus tucked away deep under rocks, so the likelihood of you just like stepping on one of these are pretty low. Might scare you away from their home, but they won't eat you. Just don't go flipping over any rocks and reaching underneath murky water in the Amazon. That's all I can say for this one. Number 4, alien fish? Well, one magnificent alien fish, Advena magnifica, which translates to magnificent alien, hence the name. No, it's not from outer space or anything, don't panic. Technically, it's not even a fish. This sea sponge literally gets its name because it just looks like E.T. Hey, I didn't name it, they did. To be fair, it does look like E.T. the alien, come on. The long neck, the huge head, the big eyes, it's literally perfect. This year, a new sea sponge was discovered officially. Well, plucked back in 2017, but they're sure now that it's a completely new species. Over 6,000 feet deep in the Pacific Ocean, research team from the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History came upon a mesmerizing seascape. Dr. Chris Ma of the team dubbed the scene, quote, a forest of the weird. The sea sponge rises up from the seafloor to look exactly onto the direction of the current, mouth open, hoping to swallow up some bacteria to eat. That's sick. Just an alien sponge sticking their ET heads out, catching the breeze, hoping for some fast food. Doesn't sound like a bad gig. The two holes of the sponge that give it its signature ET eyes appearance are clearly visible on the outside of its head. These holes, technically oscules, serve as openings of which the sponge pumps water out of. The sponge is covered in even tinier pores where the water is drawn into the sponge along with tasty bacteria and other small prey. Just sucked in through small chambers and the water's pumped out through a bunch of canals. Cristiana Castello Branco, the researcher who found this deep-sea gray, explains the importance of this discovery by saying, quote, as all of these organisms are intricately connected, by documenting and describing marine biodiversity, we are building a better understanding of life and the impact of humans on Earth. Yeah, 100% we're all connected. Let's give these little dudes some clean water. How about that, people, all right? No more Mountain Dew bottles just thrown into the lake. Pick it up.
Coming up next on the list is going to be the Baltic Sea anomaly. It's a very strange, unexplained object that was discovered in 2011 at the bottom of the Baltic Sea. Now, this object is about 60 meters long, and it's been described as a giant mushroom-shaped stone, or maybe a crashed UFO, or some even think a sunken city. A UFO underwater. Does that make it an unexplained swimming object? A USO? Of course, there are some who think that the Baltic Sea anomaly could just be a natural formation formed from years of erosion, but that would be boring. Despite numerous attempts to study the anomaly and try and figure out just what it is, it remains a puzzle to scientists and a source of fascination. I mean, that's why we're still calling it the Baltic Sea anomaly, not the Baltic Sea we know what it is. Definitely the most scary thing about it is that it's completely shrouded in uncertainty. This thing was discovered by accident. You know, they weren't even looking for it. They were looking for shipwrecks and happened to find it. And since then, it has been the subject of constant speculation. Some, like I said before, believe that it could just be a natural formation, while others argue that this could be a shining piece of evidence towards an ancient civilization or even extraterrestrial life. There are some as well who are concerned that it could be a threat to the environment around it, because there are some studies that have suggested that possibly the object could be leaking toxic chemicals or even, God forbid, radiation, which would have some pretty scary implications for the Baltic Sea and the people who live near its shores. As well, the fact that we know just like so little about this thing makes us wonder what could happen in the future. Could this be a Godzilla situation where this is a sleeping kaiju beneath the oceans that's gonna come up and destroy a city? Probably not, but it could be. The Baltic Sea anomaly, we may never find out a single thing about it. It's gonna keep our imaginations going for years until we figure out just what it is. Who knows what dangers could be lurking? Could be nothing, but could be something. A reminder of how little we truly know about what lies beneath the water. Number 2, Sakoyam. What is the last thing you think you'd want to discover at the bottom of the ocean? Is it the Kraken? Cursed pirate treasure? A cavern full of misshapen skulls and bones? It's the last one. That's the only real one out of the 3, because that's our next point. This underwater cavern in particular, one Sakoyam, is located in the Yucatan. It's a cenote, and a cenote is a natural pit from the collapse of limestone bedrock that exposes groundwater underneath. And the Mayans sometimes used to use cenotes as places to perform like a little bit of human sacrifice, like just a little bit, like a teeny tiny little bit of human sacrifice. This cenote sits outside the ruins of the ancient Mayan city of Mayapan, south of the capital of Yucatan. It was a major political center from the 12th to 15th century and contained within its stone walls a secret Mayan city. Now, there were around 40 cenotes which served as water sources for the residents and a pretty convenient place to store the misshapen bones of your human sacrifices. Legend says that this particular cenote is noteworthy for being guarded by a feathered, horse-headed serpent. And when researchers dove in, they discovered there were very real reasons to be afraid. Bones scattered across the sea floors. 15 sets of bones marked by 15 bizarrely elongated skulls. These skulls were flattened during infancy. Why the Mayans did this is a bit puzzling to researchers and me. I don't know how much you know about like anatomy and biology, but traditionally this skull works best when it's not flattened. Now, interestingly, researchers believe that these people weren't sacrificed, but rather their bones were laid to rest here to get closer to the underworld as they await the next cycle of rebirth. I only hope we didn't disturb them. I don't want to wake someone up while they're sleeping. And number 1, the Yonaguni Monument. Now, you've definitely heard of the lost city of Atlantis, this mythical city that could have been signs of an ancient technologically advanced civilization that people believe sunk. But have you ever heard of the Yonaguni Monument? It's been called the Japanese Atlantis. It's a mysterious structure found off the coast of Japan that's puzzled scientists and researchers for decades. Some argue that it was crafted by an ancient civilization. Now, the monument itself is a sprawling complex of stone structures, steps and platforms, and the most defining feature is a massive pyramid that looms over it, with precise angles and straight lines that make it seem like somebody engineered this thing rather than this thing just happened. It defies natural explanation. Many people believe that this monument was created by some unknown ancient civilization that's been completely lost to history. The design and precision of the stone suggests that it was crafted with care and skill, likely by a culture with technology a little more advanced than ours. If it's a conspiracy you prefer that aliens did it, then definitely it's a possibility that aliens built this thing. Now, others believe that the monument is simply a natural formation, and I can already hear you booing, that has been shaped by the forces of erosion and tectonic activity, as if you really believe in erosion. It's all a scam. They argue that the angles and straight lines are simply coincidental, and the monument is nothing more than a curious formation. Sure, that's plausible, but it does feel like a bit of a cop-out, and I just don't buy it personally. I'm usually more of a skeptic than not, but I have trouble believing that erosion and the passage of time could create something so strongly looking like a lost city. It would just be a very big cosmic coincidence, is all I'm saying. Now, we know so little about the monument, and perhaps we never will, and that's just what makes it so interesting. So you let me know down below, what do you think the Yonaguni Monument is? Something from an ancient culture? Evidence of aliens on Earth long before us? Or just some rocks that happen to look like a temple?
Number 5 on this list is the whalefish. This fish is like a legendary Pokemon when it comes to how rare it is. Live Science says the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute released footage in August showing a bright orange female whalefish around 6,600 feet deep offshore of Monterey Bay, California. Very little is known about this bizarre fish because of the 3 drastically different appearances of the juveniles, which are called tape tails, males, which are called big nose fish, and females, which are called whalefish. The 3 forms look so different that scientists originally thought that they were 3 different species. This shape-shifting transformation from juvenile to mature females is believed to be one of the most extreme among vertebrates. Whalefish have rarely been seen alive in the deep, so many mysteries remain regarding these remarkable fish. The Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute tweeted, "Let's pull up this image from the Smithsonian that really shows off exactly how weird this fish is." So here we have the 3 fish, and you can see exactly how different they all are. The Smithsonian says there are other examples of males and females with very different shapes and of animals changing from one shape to another as they grow older. But this is one of the most amazing examples of sexual dimorphism combined with metamorphosis ever found among vertebrates. So we are talking literally about a super rare, shape-shifting fish that in my opinion looks creepy as all holy hell. I'd say that you can find this beast at the bottom of the ocean, but odds are you won't ever even run into it because of how rare it is. We've been exploring the bottom of our oceans for quite some time now, and we are only just starting to learn a little bit about this fish. In all honesty, we really have no idea about it though. Whatever it is or whatever it does, one thing is pretty clear to me though. It's creepy looking, it lives at the bottom of the ocean, and I don't like it. Number 4 on this list is the goblin shark. This fish has got to be at the top of everyone's lists when it comes to the grossest looking creatures in the world. National Geographic says, swishing through the deep sea, a goblin shark notices a small, yummy looking squid. The animal inches towards its prey. But as the fish closes in, the snack starts to dart away. So the shark thrusts its jaw 3 inches out of its mouth. The jaw is connected to 3-inch long flaps of skin that can unfold from its snout. The predator then grabs the squid in its teeth. After scarfing down the meal, the shark fits its jaw back into its mouth and swims off. That's right guys, a goblin shark's top and bottom teeth are attached to ligaments or bands of skin tissue tucked into its mouth. When prey is just out of reach, the shark extends the elastic tissue out of the mouth to nab the grub. This allows the animal to chow down on snacks such as teleost fish and squid. It also makes the shark one jaw-dropping fish. These disgusting looking creatures like to live right at the bottom of the ocean and are native to the oceans around Japan. There are also some of them off of South Africa and in the ocean water surrounding Portugal. They can grow to be 12 feet long and weigh almost 500 pounds. These aren't monsters, but they may as well be. A 500-pound beast with a detachable jaw that looks like a goblin just chilling at the deepest, darkest part of the ocean. I truly cannot think of a whole lot of creatures I would rather run into than this freaking thing.
In third place, we have the Mariana Trench. I'm just going to apologize in advance because I know I'll slip up at some point, if not every time, and say Mariana's Trench out of habit. I can't help it. They're my favorite band. Even writing up my points today, I kept adding in the extra S. Feel free to let me know in the comments if you're also a fan. The Mariana Trench is an oceanic trench located in the western Pacific Ocean, about 200 kilometers east of the Mariana Islands, and it is the deepest oceanic trench on Earth. It's crescent-shaped and measures about 2,550 kilometers in length and 69 kilometers in width. The maximum known depth is roughly over 36,000 feet, plus or minus another 80 feet, which is way too much math for my brain. At the southern end of a small slot-shaped valley and its floor known as the Challenger Deep. For reference, if Mount Everest was located at this point in the trench, its peak would still be underwater by more than 2 kilometers. And just remember, that's the world's tallest mountain we're talking about here, not some cute little hike. The Mariana Trench has been a major area of intrigue throughout history, with the trench first being explored during the Challenger expedition in 1875 using a weighted rope, which recorded a depth of 26,850 feet. In 1877, a map was published titled the Tiefenkarte de Grosses Oceans, or Depth Map of the Great Ocean, for those of us who don't feel like butchering a pronunciation today. Most recently, in 2011, it was announced at the American Geophysical Union Fall Meeting that a U.S. Navy hydrographic ship equipped with a multi-beam echo sounder had conducted a survey which mapped the entire trench to 330 feet resolution. As of 2022, 22 crewed descents and 7 uncrewed descents have been achieved. Some notable discoveries over the years include the 1960 expedition, which claimed to have observed large creatures living at the bottom, such as flatfish that were about 30 centimeters long, and shrimp. In July of 2011, a research expedition deployed untethered landers, or drop cams for those of us that prefer simple English, equipped with digital video cameras and lights to explore this deep sea region. Gigantic single-celled organisms with a size of more than 10 centimeters in diameter, belonging to the class of Monothalamia, were observed. Monothalamia are noteworthy for their size, their extreme abundance on the seafloor, and their role as hosts for a variety of organisms. In December of 2014, a new species of snailfish was discovered at a depth of approximately 26,722 feet, breaking the previous record for the deepest living fish seen on video. During that 2014 expedition, several new species were filmed, including amphipods known as supergiants, bringing us back to that deep water gigantism I talked about earlier. Now, before any of y'all go, but Alexa, why is this scary? Well, it's because it's a constant unknown. Being so large and so deep, something new and creepy is discovered every time people explore its depths. Who knows what's still hiding down there? In second place, we have the blue-ringed octopus. Now, just a little background. An octopus is a soft-bodied, 8-limbed mollusk of the Octopoda order that consists of around 300 different species. Like other cephalopods, an octopus is bilaterally symmetric, with 2 eyes and a beaked mouth at the center point of the 8 limbs. The soft body can radically alter its shape, enabling octopuses to squeeze through small gaps. The siphon is used both for respiration and for locomotion by expelling a jet of water. Octopuses have a complex nervous system and excellent sight, and are among the most intelligent and behaviorally diverse of all invertebrates. Octopuses inhabit various regions of the ocean, including coral reefs, pelagic waters, and the seabed. Some live in the intertidal zone and others at abyssal depths. All octopuses are venomous, but only the blue-ringed octopuses are known to be deadly to humans, ergo why they're my focus today. This specific species can be found in tide pools and coral reefs in the Pacific and Indian Oceans, from Japan to Australia, and can be identified by their yellowish skin and characteristic blue and black rings that change color dramatically when threatened. They eat small crustaceans, including crabs, hermit crabs, shrimp, and other small sea animals. Despite their small size that ranges from 5 to 8 inches in circumference, they are very dangerous to humans if provoked when handled because their venom contains a powerful neurotoxin tetrodotoxin, which can cause loss of all sensations and paralysis of voluntary muscles, including the diaphragm and intercostal muscles, ergo stopping breathing. The full list of possible side effects from the venom include nausea, heart failure, severe and total paralysis, blindness, and can lead to death within minutes. The blue-ringed octopus carries enough venom to kill 26 adult humans within minutes. I'm just going to repeat that to be clear, 26 adult humans within minutes. Their bites are tiny and often painless, with many victims not realizing they have been envenomated until respiratory depression and paralysis begins. Oh, and by the way, there is no such thing as blue-ringed octopus antivenom available. And finally, in first place we have the stonefish. Now, you might be asking, after the deadly octopus and a literal pit in the ocean, how can we get scarier? Welcome to where I almost jumped out of my chair and onto the floor. Stonefish are a family of fish called Cynocidae. They are famous for being the most venomous fish in the world, with a sting that causes excruciating pain in, you guessed it, humans. Their venom is lethal to other marine animals and humans, causing intense pain, breathing problems, damage to the heart, fits, and paralysis. Now, thankfully, unlike the blue-ringed octopus, there is an antivenom, but if it's not delivered quickly, the effects can be fatal. We know of 5 different species that exist. The midget stonefish, or the Cynocea alula, estuarine stonefish, or Cynocea orida, the Red Sea stonefish, or Cynocea nana, the Cynocea platarincha, and simply the stonefish, or Cynocea verrucos. Look, I tried my best. They hail from the coastal regions of the Indo-Pacific Ocean, so northern Australia, India, the Philippines, and others. Their name comes from their ability to blend in with rocky seafloors and amongst coral, which is what makes them easily stepped on by people and is a good chunk of the danger. They have 13 spines along their backs, which is what delivers the toxin, and at the base of each spine is a venom sac, which is activated under pressure. So, you know, when somebody accidentally steps on them. Now, if that's not terrifying enough for you, because we do have a reputation to uphold here, scientists at the University of Kansas have discovered that stonefish also have a hidden switchblade in their face that they can flick out whenever they feel like they're in danger. They call this bony, blade-like protrusion a lacrimal saber, and it's located on a bone under the fish's eyes. The saber is housed inside the fish's head, and they use their cheek muscles to deploy it. One good thing at least is that it's not venomous like their spines.
Kicking off at number 5, the Caliuche. And for this first foray into these particular ghost ships that haunt the sea, we're going to be heading over to the mythologies of Chile and the many legends that have been built around its coastal landscape. One of those, according to Chilean legend, is that of the Caliuche, a large ghost ship that sails the seas of Chiloé, a small island just off the coast, where it only ever appears at night. The ship itself is said to appear as beautiful, cast in a bright white light, an enormous vessel with 3 masts and 5 sails each. It is said that when the Caliuche appears, it is always at night and always full of lights, with the sounds of a great party and a feast on board. Quickly though, it disappears, plunging back beneath the murky depths. Interestingly enough though, although this vessel is said to be similar to the Flying Dutchman, there is a boatload of mythology relating to this particular legend. One of these versions claims that the vessel is crewed by the drowned souls lost at sea, who are brought to the ship by 3 mythological figures in Chilean legend. 2 sisters, one of them the Sirena Charlotta, a type of mermaid, and the other the Pincoya, a type of water spirit said to protect the Chilean coast. And then their brother, the Pincoy, their male counterpart, who has the body of a sea lion. It's pretty cool. Once aboard, the perished souls can resume their existence in an eternal reverie of adventure on the high seas. However, there is a much more sinister version of this legend, which states that the crew of the Caliuche instead sailed the Chiloé archipelago, luring fishermen and sailors toward it with an enchanting music to enslave them as part of their crew for eternity, where they are twisted and then contorted and put to work in their afterlife. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I prefer the first one, actually. Swinging in at number 4, the Eliza Battle. And for this one, we're pinching the parameters of the 7 seas, and instead we're taking a look at one of the most notorious maritime disasters that instead of on an ocean occurred on a river. The Tombigbee River, to be precise, a stretch of water that runs between Columbus, Mississippi and Mobile, Alabama. And here we have the legend of the phantom steamboat of the Tombigbee. Back in 1852, one of the largest river steamboats constructed at the time, the Eliza Battle, was put into service between the two southern states. During one particularly cold February in the winter of 1858, after the Eliza Battle had departed the city of Columbus, the ship made its way downriver, stopping on the way at Pickensville, Gainesville, Demopolis, and several other small river landings. By the time that the steamboat had left off at Demopolis though, it was filled to the rafters with passengers, and not only passengers but also over 1,200 bales of cotton to be ferried to the final stop. Now, although it roughly still remains a complete mystery, around 2 AM on March the 1st, 1858, about 30 miles downriver from Demopolis, the crew of the Eliza Battle awoke startled to discover that the cotton bales on the main deck were on fire. Flames soared and quickly engulfed the ship's hull, soon spreading out of control despite the frigid temperatures attributed to the odd, gusty evening. The boat continued onward though, the entirety of the exterior completely engulfed in flames and cut off from their lifeboats. The passengers, many of them who had awoken dressed in their night clothes, were forced to plunge into the icy river below. Now, some of them survived mainly by floating atop the remaining cotton bales, but all in all, over 33 people lost their lives, both crew and passengers included. The Eliza Battle quickly sank beneath the water, the wreckage of which still lingers at the bottom of the Tombigbee River. It's said that on a particularly cold and windy night, the Eliza Battle will emerge from the icy fog engulfed in flames, once again a warning sign of an oncoming ill omen.
Number 3 on this list is the hum. The hum is one of the most interesting signals from the deep ocean that we've ever run into. Caitlin Schneider writes, the hum has been recorded on several occasions, mostly during the last 50 years or so. In these cases, there have been reports of a relentless and troubling low-frequency humming noise that can only be heard by a certain portion of the population. It's difficult to pinpoint when instances of the hum began, but it's been well documented since the 1970s, and since then, cases have popped up all over the world, from Ontario, Canada, to Taos, New Mexico, to Bristol, England, to Largs, Scotland, and Auckland, New Zealand. In most instances, the affected group only makes up 2% of the population, but for those individuals, the hum is largely inescapable and impossible to track. Those affected report never having heard noises before and say the hum is generally heard indoors and becomes louder at night. It's also most common in rural and suburban areas and among people between age 55 and 70. Scientists have long investigated the cause of the drone, occasionally tracing it to industrial equipment emitting particular frequencies. For the most part though, the sound has left the world completely puzzled. The list of other possible culprits is long and wide-ranging. Wireless communication devices, power or gas lines, electromagnetic radiation, radio waves, earth tremors, or the ocean are all suspects. Because the hum appears and disappears, and because the cause may vary from case to case, the phenomenon still baffles researchers. At this point, a few things are clear. The hum is real and likely a byproduct of 21st century living. They think that this sound might come from the ocean, but they're also really not that sure. This is one of those ones that just really doesn't make any sense. Caitlin writes at the end there that it might be a product of 21st century living, but I frankly don't understand that. How is our way of living causing this hum to come from the ocean all around the globe at totally random times? Also, why is it that people from the ages of 55 to 70 are more affected by this? It's stuff like this that reminds me that we aren't as smart as we think we are. Sometimes I think that we're so advanced that we have it all figured out, but then I'm reminded that there's just this massive hum that occasionally happens which nobody knows why. What it means or what it could do is all a mystery, which honestly adds to the scare factor. Number 2 on this list is skyquakes. So when you hear skyquakes, you probably don't think that they have anything to do with the water, but they actually do. Caitlin Schneider says that skyquakes or unexplained sonic booms have been heard around the world for the last 200 years or so, usually near bodies of water. These head scratchers have been reported on the Ganges in India, the East Coast and inland Finger Lakes of the US, near the North Sea, and in Australia, Japan, and Italy. The sounds, which has been described as mimicking massive thunder or cannon fire, has been chalked up to everything from meteors entering the atmosphere to gas escaping from vents in the Earth's surface, or the gas exploding after being trapped underwater as a result of biological decay, to earthquakes, military aircraft, underwater caves collapsing, and even a possible byproduct of solar and or Earth-based magnetic activity. So there's a lot of explanations there, but I want to circle back to the one about gas getting trapped underwater. Apparently the gas gets trapped and then causes an explosion. Well, what if a ton of gas gets trapped? What if so much gas gets trapped that the explosion doesn't just cause a sound, but actually causes a catastrophic event? It leads to a huge tsunami that just wipes out an entire city. If this is the explanation for the sound, then I don't see why that isn't possible. Which would mean that whenever we hear such a thing, it's just a potential natural disaster waiting to happen. All that makes it a pretty scary sound if you ask me. And finally, number 1 is the bloop. Potentially one of the most infamous sounds ever recorded from the ocean, the bloop has kept experts guessing for years. In 1997, a super low frequency but massively powerful sound was heard in multiple spots around the globe. Experts think that it originated off the coast of South Africa, but are not 100% sure. The fact that it was heard repeatedly over and over again during the summer of 1997, but then was never heard of after that. No one really knows what caused this massive sound, and maybe the most terrifying part is that scientists haven't ruled out something organic. Something organic means something living. A massive creature that would break records for anything that we've ever seen before. Far larger than a blue whale, the largest known creature on the planet. This would be groundbreaking if it was something organic and would totally change the way we look at the ocean. Conspiracy theorists have thought that the government does know what it is and is actually keeping it under wraps for fear of how the public will respond. Some people even believe that it might be Cthulhu, the ancient god written about in the Lovecraftian universe. Now once again, the most accepted explanation is that of a massive iceberg scraping the ground, but if that's what caused it, then why did it keep happening over and over again? Comment down below what you guys think is the true cause of this bloop, because I truly have no idea.
In at number 5, underwater river. Within the ocean, there was a river found, and it's known as the Black Sea Undersea River. This discovery was the first of its kind in the entire world at the time and was found in August of 2010. The underwater river is saline water flowing through the Bosporus Strait and along the seabed of the Black Sea. Before this discovery, scientists had previously found channels running along the ocean floor based on sonar screening. One of the largest is from the mouth of the Amazon River into the Atlantic Ocean and found off the coast of Greenland, the Congo and Bengal. It was believed that these channels could possibly function as rivers. It was this discovery specifically that truly proved their theory correct. This river functions due to the salty ocean water spilling through the Bosporus Strait from the Mediterranean Sea into the Black Sea, where the water has a lower salt content. The largest of these rivers are several miles wide and run for thousands of miles out into the deep ocean, and they proved to be vital to the creatures living in and around them. In many ways, these underwater rivers are very similar to rivers we see on land. They have banks on either side, and smaller rivers feed into the larger ones. These rivers carve valleys into the sea floor, and they follow certain paths and can even change course. Due to the power and unpredictability of these rivers, they have been extremely difficult to explore and learn more about. Researchers tend to send down recording instruments and robotic submarines to try and learn more about these rivers. Sedimentologist Dan Parsons says that these rivers are incredibly powerful and have destructive flows, so it's important we understand how they work. If it was a river on the surface of the earth, then it was ranked as the 6th largest river in the world. This discovery is truly an amazing natural wonder, and because they are so hard to research, study, and learn about, is an incredible phenomenon. In at number 4, we have Great Blue Hole. The Great Blue Hole is located in Belize and is truly a wonder. The hole is a natural sinkhole with surrounding corals and shallow water, accounting for the perfect circle shape and deep blue color. It lies near the center of Lighthouse Reef, and it was formed during several occurrences of Quaternary glaciation when the sea levels were much lower. Fun fact about the Lighthouse Reef can actually be seen from space, and the Great Blue Hole is near the center of it and can see it so clearly from so far away. This site was made famous by Jacques Cousteau, who declared it one of the top 5 scuba diving sites in the world. It was first discovered in 1971 and then explored much more during an expedition in 1997 to collect core sample from the Blue Hole's floor and document the cave system. In December 2018, 2 submarines descended into the Blue Hole to be able to map its interior, and using solar scanning, they were able to make a 3D map of the 1,000-foot wide hole. They had discovered that there was a layer of hydrogen sulfide around 300 feet down. The Great Blue Hole has its name for a reason. It is extremely deep, and it has measured over 400 feet deep. At that depth, it becomes very dark, cold, and not much can survive down there. The submarine expedition also discovered bodies of 2 divers at the bottom. They were believed to be 2 out of 3 divers who had gone missing while diving there. This massive hole is a very popular spot for scuba divers for its crystal blue color and being able to see many different species in and around the area. There are many different types of fish, including the midnight parrotfish and the Caribbean reef shark, along with different shark species like the bull shark and hammerheads. In 2012, the Discovery Channel ranked the Great Blue Hole as number 1 on its list of the top 10 most amazing places on Earth, and if you're interested in checking out this natural wonder, there are full-day trips from the coastal tourist communities in Belize, and you can explore the Great Blue Hole.
Number 3 on this list is a kelp forest. Duct Tape Jedi writes, after a day of boat diving in Monterey Bay on the California coast, we had a night dive planned. I was there with 2 friends celebrating my birthday, and we were part of a larger group of divers. My friends were too tired for the night dive, and I was too, but I got invited to buddy with another diver whose friends also decided to stay on the boat. So I was following my new buddy through the kelp when some of it caught on my tank. I tried to pull clear but managed to get tangled even more to the point where I was unable to move. I kept shining my light around looking for my buddy, but he was nowhere to be seen. After what seemed like an hour but was possibly just a few minutes, I felt some of the kelp loosen up and then saw that my buddy was cutting it off with a knife. I was so exhausted after struggling that when we got to the surface, he had to tow me back to the boat. So discovering a full-on kelp forest, I mean, that would honestly be really cool, I think. Obviously, what happened to our diver would have been incredibly scary though. Having to wrestle for over an hour or however long he was there for with some kelp in the dark, probably thinking that you're going to drown, doesn't sound great. But if you did discover a kelp forest and that didn't happen, then I think it'd be pretty sweet. If you're going to go though, then make sure you carry your own knife because you wouldn't want to end up like our friend here. Number 2 on this list is a body. This story is from Texas Guy 911 and he says, I was diving in a local pond with a group of much more advanced cave divers than I was. I'm leading the dive as to get used to the pressures and responsibilities of heading the procession, and they're mentoring me. The known horrible visibility makes it impossible to navigate by compass, so we follow a line put by other divers. These lines go from one sunken item to another. So I know I'm about to hit a small sunken boat, but I don't remember which one. There are a few similar in a row in the same state of decay. I'm the first in the group and I get to the boat and I see someone's black army boots sticking out from the inner quarters. It looks somewhat new, not like items you find on the bottom. It's hard to see due to so much muck in the water. So I touch the boot, thinking it's by itself, but it won't lift, like it's attached to something heavy. I put my hand further in and feel the leg continuing out, pants, the calf, and now I see the second leg. I turn around and show a sign for the emergency ascend to the group behind me. Everyone has a sour face. Nobody wants to go to the surface, but it's a rule that if one says up, others in the group must abort, no questions. They wanted me to explain with signs why, but what's a diver's sign for a corpse? I feel like I rush toward the surface, even though I'm trying to stay calm and take time. So we're on the lake's surface. I have this adrenaline rush, can't breathe enough. So I tell them there's a body down there. I see rolling eyes from everyone once they see I'm serious. I describe in detail what I saw and then we go down again. Once we locate it, we don't know if we should go forward or backward as there are several boats on the line and who knows in which boat the body is in and how far we drifted while taking it out on the surface. Well, we find all the boats before seeing the original one, of course. So our customary leader goes into the boat's cabin and we wait. I'd say he was rather courageous at this point. Then he emerges from the cloud of muck and tells us all to surface. So gluing information together from what we learned later on, it actually turns out the police or some other agency had body recovery training in the same lake the same day. When they went for lunch, they stuffed their fully dressed, anatomically correct rubber doll in one of the sunken boats for a few hours for safekeeping. So that didn't turn out to be an actual body, but I still think this would have been super scary. To feel a leg and then another leg in the darkness of the water like that on one of your first dives, I mean, that would be a lot. Maybe I'm just weak because deep sea diving is just not for me, but honestly, that would have scarred me for potentially life, whether the body is real or not. Number 1 on this list is a survivor. Off the coast of Nigeria roughly 8 years ago, a tugboat broke down and sank to the bottom of the ocean. 3 whole days later, a diving crew went out to the wreckage to see what was down there and recover the dead bodies. It was thought that no one could have possibly survived the crash and that all 12 people on the boat were dead. That's why the crew was so shocked when they found someone had actually survived. Maybe this doesn't seem as scary as finding someone who had died, but we're lucky enough to have the actual clip of them recovering this person and just watch as the hand comes out.
Alright, you found one, yeah? He's alive, he's alive.
The startled dive team discovered the tugboat's cook had survived for 3 days.
So that one image of having a hand reach out of the dark and stormy nothing would have actually terrified me. Not to mention that man who survived down there. That would have been 3 days by himself surviving in this tiny air pocket, most likely believing that the world has left you for dead. This is definitely one of those scary discoveries that's for the better, because someone's life was saved, but as the Reddit user Edgar writes, I can't imagine how creepy and unexpected it would be to be on a mission to recover the dead and have a hand reach out to you like it did.
Coming in at number 5, we have Stranded Ship. In Zakynthos, Greece, on the beautiful beaches lays a haunting sight of a stranded and rusting MV Panagiotis ship washed up on the shore in 1980 and continues to lay on the sand to this day. Many tourists come to view this phenomenon, and due to the mysterious ship, it's been nicknamed Shipwreck Beach. Little is known about the ship and is highly debated. One theory is that the ship was used for smuggling and abandoned when the crew were being pursued by the Navy on their way to Piraeus from Albania. Another theory states that the ship was making its way from Turkey with a freight of contraband cigarettes headed for Italy. When encountering stormy weather, the ship went into a cove where the crew abandoned the ship in fear of getting caught. Soon after the ship was abandoned, rumors started swirling that the ship had many valuable items on it, and authorities eventually convicted 29 people for looting cargo and valuable equipment from the wrecked ship. The location of the Panagiotis was prominently featured in the hit Korean drama Descendants of the Sun, leading to a surge of interest among Chinese and Korean tourists. This beach was briefly closed for tourists in 2018 due to the fear of landslides due to a large boulder falling onto the beach, but left the ship unharmed. The beach was later opened, and that same year the beach was named as the world's best beach in a poll by over 1,000 travel journalists and professionals. The beach and surrounding areas are stunning, but the mystery of the ship lingers and gives creepy vibes when you're on vacation in such a beautiful place. Some tourists have stated while getting close to the ship they've heard noises coming from inside, and some locals believe that this ship is haunted by the past crew members. In at number 4, we have numerous lost cities. One of the most famous lost cities that have been located in the ocean is the lost city of Atlantis. The lost city used to actually consist of a few islands where the founders had created a utopian civilization and became a great naval power. Their home consisted of concentric islands separated by wide moats and linked by a canal. The island of gods contained gold, silver and other precious metal and had an abundance of rare and exotic wildlife. Many believe Atlantis and the story behind it was a fictional story that was created by an ancient Greek philosopher Plato, but others believe it was a real story and that the lost city is supposedly located in the Atlantic Ocean, while others say it's the Mediterranean or under Antarctica, and this is a popular debate. Besides the highly debated Atlantis, there are currently at least a dozen lost cities that rest at the bottom of the ocean near places like Greece, Japan and India. The Sunken Palace of Cleopatra is one of the most fabled underwater remnants of the ancient world. It had sunken more than 1400 years ago when an earthquake and tsunami hit Alexandria, Egypt. One of the most spectacular and intact lost cities is Shicheng, or otherwise known as the Lion City, which is located at the bottom of China's Quandao Lake. Not from ancient times, but apparently it was purposely flooded in 1959 to make room for a dam and an adjoining hydroelectric station. Another lost city comes from Dwarka, India, which is known as the Gateway to Heaven, which was an ancient city dating back as far back as 574 AD. The ancient Dwarka was sunken by the rising of the ocean levels and taken to the bottom of the sea at the Gulf of Cambay. Marine archaeological explorations have shed light on the structures and other artifacts these ancient people lived in. Many things have been seen and recovered, like ancient structures, grids, pillars, stone anchors, pottery, stone sculptures, bronze, copper, and so much more.
Number 3 on this list is a color change. Now, a color change doesn't really sound that scary at all, but in this particular case, it's definitely pretty creepy. A diver writes, I was diving off the coast of Fiji and we went through a natural tunnel, like a 10-meter cave/passage through a rock formation. So we start swimming through the cave and suddenly the light was weird, like the blue tint from the water has been replaced by a red one. Now all divers will know that this isn't only weird because the color changed, but also because red is the first color to disappear after a certain depth, usually between 30 to 40 feet, and we were well over 70 feet. Also bear in mind this was late morning on a sunny day. So imagine this scene. Me and my dive buddy are going through an underwater cave and suddenly everything, for no apparent reason, is tinted red, a color that you were literally supposed to be unable to see while diving at that depth during the day. Upon exiting the cave, everything was back to blue. I thought it was just me, so I didn't signal to go back up. After the dive, my buddy asked me if I'd seen the water tint red as well. We can't explain it, and the folks from the local dive shop had no idea what we were talking about. Now that story is super weird. We've got to keep in mind that these guys were 70 feet below the surface at that point. If I was 70 feet below the surface and everything changed colors to a deep red, I would be very scared for my life. Obviously we don't know for sure, but it sounds like that cave that they stumbled upon is haunted by something. It's either haunted by something or that particular cave can produce some strange light phenomenon. Either way, it would have been very frightening, and I'm glad that the two divers in this story made it out okay. Number 2 on this list is a school of sharks. The next discovery comes in from a professional diver in the Bahamas who was diving down to recover a dead body. What's crazy about this story is that the dead body isn't the scary part. His online name is Keith Ba, and he writes, "After an hour or two of searching, I went back into the blue hole to see if there were any signs of him. Saw the glint of his watch and his arm sticking out near the bottom. Started descending down to the bottom to recover the body. On the way down, realized that the bottom was a school of sharks that must have been there for breeding. So many sharks that they blocked the view of the actual bottom. Descended into darkness, grabbed his arm, couldn't stand to look at the body, and started ascending. The sharks followed and were circling around the both of us. Had to take a break at halfway at around 60 feet as to not get the bends. Extremely scared. The entire time waiting to normalize being super scared. Victim was struck by a passing boat." So not only is finding a dead body underwater super scary in my opinion, but to stumble upon so many sharks that you can't even see the bottom of the ocean, that's beyond terrifying. Then to have said sharks follow you up to the surface, deciding whether or not they're going to eat you, would have been absolutely brutal. He didn't specify what type of sharks they were, but after doing some research, sharks tend to get far more aggressive during mating, and therefore the risk of our divers getting attacked is significantly increased. Also, the number of sharks that can gather during mating season can rise into the hundreds. One shark is scary enough and will likely win in a fight, but tens to even hundreds of them would have easily had their way with this diver. Not sure about you guys, but if that was me, I would be exclusively a land dweller from then on out. Number 1 on this list is a person. People aren't typically scary discoveries, but in this case by some deep sea divers, it definitely was. One diver writes, "Me and 2 buddies were on a night dive in the Puget Sound hunting prawns. It was about 1 AM and we're a good 100 feet deep, the darkest black you could imagine. We used to do this thing on night dives where we'd get in a circle, turn off our lights, then stir up the water and watch the bioluminescence float around us like floating stars in a black watery space. Only this time, we turn off our lights, stir up the water, and the water glows just enough to reveal a 4th person sitting in our circle. We were at a dive resort, so it wasn't so odd to see another diver, only it was 1 AM and we'd see nobody else prepping a dive at the dock. He was also alone, which was odd considering the dangerous conditions of a night dive in those waters, and he had no fins or gloves. I don't know how he swam so well without fins or didn't get hypothermia without boots or gloves. We wore dry suits because it was so cold, but this dude was in a wetsuit with exposed skin. We thought we saw a giant gash on one of his legs. So the 3 of us all notice him and we're too scared to move. I can hear my buddies panting in their regs and the guy just smiles, waves, and then swims away. Whenever you think you're alone and someone just shows up like in an alley at night, it's weird. 100 feet underwater at night is terrifying. After reading this story, I got some serious ghost vibes. Now obviously I can't know for sure and those divers didn't either, but this man just appeared out of nowhere and had a giant gash on his leg. He also wasn't wearing the proper gear and they didn't see him enter the water when they were getting ready to go. Potentially, rather than just be another diver out and about, This is the ghost of someone who went diving and died. Now their spirit just swims through the ocean for eternity. I've read a lot of ghost stories and reports of sightings before, and that has all the telltale signs of one. Number 5 on this list is Julia. According to Wikipedia, Julia is a sound recorded on March 1st, 1999 by the US National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. NOAA said the source of the sound was most likely a large iceberg that had run aground off Antarctica. It was large enough to be heard over the entire equatorial Pacific Ocean autonomous hydrophone array with a duration of about 2 minutes and 43 seconds. Due to the uncertainty of the arrival azimuth, the point of origin could only be narrowed to between Bransford Straits and Cape Adar. The most accepted explanation is that a massive iceberg scraped along the ground, but in truth, it could be anything. This was a one-off sound, so we'll likely never know for sure, but an iceberg, a massive animal, some underground volcanoes, maybe even tectonic plates shifting, all of these are potential explanations for why this sound may have come about, and none of them are great. This sound was huge, and if this is what it sounds like for tectonic plates to shift, then they're probably shifting around in ways that we don't really need them to be doing right now. Also, there was a rumor that NASA had photographs of the body of water that was suspected, and that there was a massive shadow in it. People believe that they may have been able to capture a photo of some giant creature down there, but don't want to reveal such information to the public. If the creature is as big as people think, then I kinda understand why. Number 4 on this list is the upsweep. Schneider writes, upsweep is an unidentified sound that's existed at least since the Pacific Marine Environmental Laboratory began recording SOSUS, an underwater sound surveillance system with listening stations around the world in 1991. The sound consists of a long train of narrow band upsweeping sounds of several seconds duration each, the laboratory reports. The source location is difficult to identify, but it's in the Pacific around the halfway point between Australia and South America. Upsweep changes with the seasons, becoming loudest in spring and autumn, though it isn't clear why. The leading theory is that it's related to volcanic activity. This sound or signal is very unique because it keeps coming back and changes with the weather. Frankly, I don't really understand how this could possibly be related to volcanic activity because the season is dictating how loud or soft the noise is. Why would the fact that we're in fall change anything about a volcano's activity and therefore the sound? Is it possible that this explanation is just an explanation of convenience, and the fact of the matter is no one really has any idea why this is happening? Or maybe even worse, they do know why it's happening and are just covering it up anyways.
Coming in at number 3, we have the Bermuda Triangle. Named for the triangular shape of around 500,000 square miles of ocean between Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico, for centuries the Bermuda Triangle has been mystified as a harrowing patch of ocean where sailors and pilots are prone to lose contact with the natural world and disappear forever. Back when Christopher Columbus first sailed the area, he claimed to see a giant ball of light in the sky that crashed into the horizon and made it glow. Soon after, all sorts of strange events happened in the area, including several boats mysteriously disappearing, and in one incident in 1945, an entire squadron of US torpedo bombers vanished into thin air due to all these weird instances, giving this place the name the Devil's Triangle. The exact number of ships and airplanes that have disappeared is not known, but it's estimated that around 50 ships and 20 planes have been victim to the Bermuda Triangle, and many of these mysterious disappearances of these ships and planes have never been recovered. Many see the Bermuda Triangle as a real phenomenon and have multiple theories to try and explain this mysterious place, and some of these theories are human error, paranormal explanations, violent weather like hurricanes, the Gulf Stream, which is a major surface current within the ocean, methane hydrates, which is a form of natural gas that causes bubbles to form around the ship and ultimately sink it without warning. All of these are only theories, and the Bermuda Triangle to this day is the most notorious sea legend of all time. In at number 2, we have the Gulf of Mexico's cursed shipwreck. An estimated 4,000 shipwrecks litter the seabed across the stretch of water, and the Gulf of Mexico is one of the wealthiest locations for maritime archaeology in the world. In February 2001, oil workers for ExxonMobil were laying some pipeline when they happened to stumble upon a shipwreck about 2,600 feet deep. After discovering the wreckage, a team was assembled to explore this mysterious ship, but nothing seemed to go right. The exploration submarine malfunctioned right as it was getting ready to go down to check out the wreck, and that was only the beginning of these mysterious mysterious malfunctions. Others include video monitors going out whenever they fired their thrusters, sonars breaking, and hydraulics going haywire with no explanation for any of these problems. After nothing working and things continuing to break, the Navy sent a researcher submarine down to investigate the wreckage, and on the way down it suddenly self-destructed, and somehow when it finally did get to the wreck, its arms were too short to reach anything. 6 months later, in July in 2002, a team working aboard the NR-1 decided to launch a robotic sub down to the wreck site, but the malfunctions continued. The second the rover entered the water, it veered to the right and went out of control. The tether had caught in the propellers, which caused the vessel to smash into the underside of the ship, and the rover was never recovered. Later in the summer of 2002, the curse would continue as a ship from Sustainable Sea program of the NOAA offered to pick up artifacts from the site. The first time the vessel attempted to leave the dock, debris was lodged in the propeller. The second time, the propeller locked and the ship ended up in dry lock, needing repairs. Over the years, many others have tried to learn more about this wreck, but little was found, and what was found wasn't at all helpful. To this day, nothing has been able to get too close to the shipwreck to investigate and explore the phenomenon, and very little is known about this mysterious ship. Many believe the lives lost in the wreck continue to haunt the ship and will keep anyone and everything out of it at all costs. And finally, in at number 1, we have the unmapped ocean floor. This is truly one of the biggest mysteries, and humans' curiosity about the Earth's floor is centuries old. Much remains to be learned about the ocean, especially exploring the mystery of the deep sea. From mapping and describing the physical, biological, geological, chemical, and archaeological aspects of the ocean and understanding their dynamics. For centuries, scholars believed the deep sea to be a lifeless place. Until the late 19th century, we've discovered there is a diversity of life and creatures living down there. Many researchers and divers had tried to dive and take submarines down to explore more of this unknown place, but it's very hard due to the extremely cold temperatures, the darkness, and the literally bone-shattering pressure that's more than 1,000 times that at sea level. In 2019, a retired naval officer, Victor Vescovo, set a new record as one of the deepest dives to date, reaching almost 36,000 feet down in a submarine into the deepest place on Earth, the Marianas Trench. The ocean covers more than 70% of the planet's surface, driving weather, regulating temperature, and ultimately supporting all life's organisms. Throughout history, the ocean has been a vital source of sustenance, transport, commerce, growth, and inspiration. But to this day, more than 80% of the ocean remains unmapped, unobserved, and unexplored, and it's still unknown how deep the ocean really is. Given the high degree of difficulty and cost in exploring our ocean using underwater vehicles, researchers have relied heavily on technologies such as sonar to generate maps of the seafloor, but currently less than 10% of the global ocean is mapped using modern sonar technology, and only about 35% of the United States have been mapped using modern methods. As we go deeper into the ocean floor, it's too deep for this modern technology because it's too remote and dark for this type of visual mapping. So if you go swimming in the ocean, it's very unknown of what is swimming and living below you. But scientists and researchers continue to develop technologies to unlock the many secrets of the ocean. The NOAA is working to increase our understanding of the ocean realm.
Number 5. Siphonophores. Now, what you're looking at right now definitely looks alien. It looks like something out of one of the Avatar movies. It looks like a giant sea serpent, right? What it actually is one long organism made up of countless individual creatures joined together called siphonophores. Now, siphonophores are some of the weirdest and most fascinating creatures in the ocean. They're a type of colony. They're a living colony that consists of multiple individual creatures called zooids. Each one has their own specialized function and they all work together. From their appearance and behavior, there's not really a lot of things like siphonophores out there. They come in all sorts of shapes and sizes, but they all share a basic structural design. They consist of a long, slender stem, or like a stalk, with multiple branches or tentacles coming out of it. Each of these branches or tentacles is actually an individual little zooid, specialized for a particular task like feeding, swimming, or reproduction. Oh, everybody's jealous of the reproductive zooids. Always a feeder. One of the most interesting aspects of them though is how they eat actually. They're active predators and they use those long tentacles to capture small fish and plankton and stuff. However, unlike a lot of predators, siphonophores don't just use their tentacles to capture their prey. What they do is they use these stinging cells called nematocysts, which are located on the surface of their tentacles to paralyze their prey. And once their prey is immobilized, tentacles coil around and bring it to the siphonophore's mouth, which is located at the base of the tentacles. And yep, you are definitely going to be thinking about that tonight when you try to go to sleep. Now, despite all these cool things I have told you, there's still so much we don't know about them because they're largely a mystery. They're difficult to study and understand, mostly because they're really far down deep in the ocean where we can't get at, and they're also extremely fragile. But boy, are they weird. And if you're looking for more strange stories about horrors under the water, well, this is part 2, so you already know we've got plenty of videos on that. And oh my god, if you like the Megalodon, we've got a video or 2 for you. But if you don't want stuff from the ocean, we got just about anything scary you could think of. Click on through and subscribe, and make sure you hit that bell and don't miss a scream. But, whew, slow down there, buddy. Do that at the end of this video, okay? I got way more weird sea creatures for you. Number 4, the immortal jellyfish. We're all born to die, are we not? That's what Lana Del Rey said, and I trust her more than anyone. Well, us humans, maybe. But some of us are built different, like the immortal jellyfish. The immortal jellyfish is a fascinating and downright eerie creature that's got the attention of scientists and the public alike. This thing is tiny, it's only about 5 millimeters inside, it's found all over the world, and it has an incredibly unique ability to regenerate its cells and reverse its aging process, effectively making it immortal. So far, this is the only creature that's been shown to prestige once it hits max level. It's a little joke for my Modern Warfare friends. This means that the immortal jellyfish can genuinely live forever as long as it doesn't fall prey to predators. Pretty good deal. While the idea of immortality sounds like a dream, I mean that's like what half of like all science fiction stories are about, is trying to make yourself immortal. The immortal jellyfish has raised concerns about the impact of its population growth on ecosystems. Because these things technically have the potential to live forever, it's got the ability to reproduce rapidly and take over the habitats of other species, disrupting the balance of marine ecosystems. This could lead to an extinction of other species, and who knows what kind of ripples that would have on the food chain. And even though they're pretty small, I think an army of immortal jellyfish are actually kind of scary. Scientists are studying the creature's unique ability to regenerate its cells and hope that maybe they can unlock the secrets of human aging and potentially develop new treatments. This definitely has the possibility to benefit humanity in many ways. It sure would be awesome to live to like 300, but it also raises a ton of ethical questions, and who knows what that kind of technology or research could look like in the wrong hands. If you've ever played the video game BioShock, I feel like you should already know a thing or two about the dangers of harvesting undersea creatures for their DNA to inject into humans. It did not work well for anybody in Rapture. It was terrible there. So maybe it's best we leave those cells inside the jellyfish.
In at number 3, we have vampire squids. Not only are vampires on land, but they also been found in the ocean. The vampire squids reside throughout the oceans all around the world, mainly in tropical oceans in extreme deep sea conditions. This squid uses its organs and its unique oxygen metabolism to be able to thrive in the parts of the ocean with the lowest concentration of oxygen, which is extremely hard to do for many other sea creatures. The vampire squid is the only known cephalopod able to live its entire life in what's known as the oxygen minimum zone, at saturations as low as 3%. These squids were discovered during the Valdivia expedition in 1898, which was led by Carl Chun, a zoologist who was inspired by the Challenger expedition and wanted to verify that life does indeed exist below 300 feet. Back then, much of the sea wasn't known about, let alone explored, so this was very new for that time, and during the expedition the vampire squid was found. When the discovery was made, they were originally described as an octopus because of their physical appearance, and 8 arms, but they are united by a web of skin and were later assigned to be part of the squid family. These scary sea creatures can grow to a length of 1 foot, and their gelatinous body varies in color from jet black to a pale reddish depending on location and lighting conditions. It is blue or red colored eyes are some of the largest in the entire animal kingdom. If these creatures become agitated, they will eject a sticky cloud of glow in the dark like mucus, which will stick to their predators and make them visible to other predators while the vampire squid escapes. In at number 2, we have chimera fish. These fish are famously called the voodoo doll fish because they look like someone took many different types of parts of fish and mashed them all together, creating a terrifying looking deep sea creature. In Greek mythology, the chimera was a monstrous fire-breathing hybrid hybrid creature. These fish are closely related to sharks, and to date there are 50 species of Chimera have been recorded worldwide. Most of these fish can be found in the deep ocean, in depths of over 500 meters down, so little is known about these mysterious deep sea animals because they are so difficult to study, let alone find. The Chimera fish varies in color from black to pale blue to brownish gray and have long bodies with exceptionally large heads. Their eyes are large and translucent with a green color which helps them to see in the dark deep sea. These fish tend to feed on bottom-dwelling creatures like crabs, octopi, marine worms, and sea urchins. The Chimera crush their prey with their 3 rows of sharp teeth, and like sharks they use electroreception to find their prey in the dark. The creatures are said to have originated over 400 million years ago during the Silurian times, but because of today's overfishing they're usually a big target, particularly in coastal waters. These creatures are essential to the deep sea ecosystem. They tend to live up to 30 years old, and they also reach sexual maturity late and produce few young, so being a target to fisheries is a huge issue for them. If you're ever going scuba diving, I would beware of the predatory creatures, but thankfully they tend to reside in the deep sea, but they are found in oceans all throughout the world except in Antarctica. And finally, in at number 1 we have garbage. One of the most terrifying on this list is the amount of garbage in our oceans. Garbage is ugly, and it is a threat to all of us on land and especially those living in the oceans. Whenever you go to a beach, no matter in your hometown or on the other side of the world on vacation, you have probably seen some sort of garbage or debris floating in the water or on the beach. The amount of waste in our oceans have created islands of trash that collect into massive piles that float on the surface. One of the most notorious ones is the Great Pacific Patch, or the Trash Vortex, which spans from the west coast of North America to Japan. Last year it was recorded that there are about 5.25 trillion pieces of plastic waste in our oceans, and studies expect this number to triple in the next 2 decades if no significant action is taken. When researchers and divers traveled down to the deepest part of the ocean, which was a record depth, there was one thing that was so unexpected that they saw. This expedition was done by American undersea explorer Victor Vescovo, who was the first person to dive to the deepest points of the Earth's ocean, traveling over 35,000 feet, and is the deepest manned sea dive ever recorded. During his dive, he discovered something truly terrifying and completely unexpected. In the deepest part of the ocean, where no one has ever traveled, a plastic bag was found. Not only are there large pieces of plastic and garbage in our oceans, but it's the microplastic and the remains of trash that are still composting that are more threatening to marine life than anything, because they can quickly enter and poison the creatures living in our oceans and even people. The ocean is vital to our survival, and the amount of garbage and plastic found in our oceans is baffling, and we as humans need to make some serious changes.
Kicking off today's list, we have the sunken city of Dwarka. Until roughly 50 years ago, it was simply a legend, a story passed throughout the ages. The most famous legend about the lost city of Dwarka can be found in the ancient epic of Mahabharata. Dwarka, similar to Atlantis, is said to have sunk beneath the sea at some point in the distant past. According to the sacred scripture of Srimad Bhagavatam, the city of Dwarka was built in response to Jarasandha, the ruler of Magadha, who was constantly attacking Mathura. To prevent further attacks on his clan, Lord Krishna decided to establish a separate city on India's western coast. The city quickly rose to prominence and began the unstoppable pivot of Lord Krishna's mission, housing thousands of people in approximately 900 palaces that were crafted out of silver, gold, and precious stones, along with being heavily fortified and could only be reached by ship. At the time, the city of Dwarka quickly became a talking point around the world, inspiring awe and wonder. According to the Mahabharata's 23rd and 34th stanzas, the city was inundated and submerged by the Arabian Sea on the day that Krishna departed the earth to join the spiritual world after 125 years, and this is when the Kali age began. The ocean's deity reclaimed the land, sinking the lost city of Dwarka, but sparing Lord Krishna's palace. It is also said that the lost city of Dwarka was attacked by Vimana, a flying machine. The description of the fight encourages ancient alien theories, as it appears that it was fought with sophisticated technology and powerful weapons from orbit. The spacecraft launched an attack on the city using energy weaponry, which resembled a lightning strike to onlookers, and it was so devastating that much of the city lay in ruins following the attack. A marine scientist discovered remnants of an underwater civilization near the coast of Dwarka, the city that's still on land that is, in the 1970s, and in 2002, scientists discovered an extremely advanced civilization civilization from the past lying untouched beneath the ocean's surface. With the help of sound matrix and image technology, along with sub-bottom profiling, marine scientists were able to find the exact location of the city, including some stone structures. The lost city of Dwarka was officially found 120 feet underwater in the Gulf of Kambat off the western coast of India. Thanks to carbon testing, it was established that the city is anywhere between 7,000 to 9,500 years old and stretches out 7 to 8 kilometers long and 3 to 4 kilometers in width. The most fascinating, or creepy thing about this underwater city, depending on your point of view, is that all human remains are still intact. Ergo, the main reason it made its way to today's list. Look, I'm not a scuba diver, but I can't think I'd be too fond of swimming around casually, admiring, architecture, and bam! Perfectly preserved dead bodies. During the 2002 excavation of Dwarka, many mud vessels, temple bells, ancient ritualistic vessels, and other artifacts were found, with the carbon dating indicating that they date back to roughly 7,200 BC, otherwise known as the prehistoric period. At the time of this research, scientists also found that a massive man-made wall that's almost 2,000 feet tall that has since been unearthed during periods of low tide and can't be easily seen. Granted, they're still waiting on absolute results from some strange structures made of iron they weren't able to identify. Maybe they're from the aliens? In fourth place, we have the Antarctica sea spiders. Okay, I'll admit it now, this one might be on the list purely because of how much it made me jump while researching. Seriously, look at the photos of these things. Yeah, this reaction is genuine. If I get nightmares tonight, I'm blaming y'all, okay? Before I start talking specifically about the big guys, time to dive into exactly what sea spiders are. Sea spiders are marine arthropods of the Pentapoda order and belong to the Pycnogonida class. They're cosmopolitan, and well, to some of us that sounds like a fancy drink. It just means they're found in oceans around the world. Lucky for me. There's over 1,300 known species, and they have legs ranging from 1 millimeter to over 70 centimeters in length, and that's over 2 feet in length. While most of them are towards the smaller end of this range, that one qualify as terrifying now. Would it? Although sea spiders are not true spiders, or even arachnids, their traditional classification as chelicerates would place them closer to true spiders than to other well-known arthropod groups, such as insects or crustaceans if correct. Sea spiders tend to either walk along the bottom of the ocean with their stilt-like legs, or just swim above it using an umbrella pulsing motion. They're mostly carnivorous predators or scavengers that feed on sponges, polychaetes, and bryozoans. Alright, time to talk specifically about the big guys. Those really long legs I mentioned a moment ago are everything to the Antarctic sea spider, since they're where its vital organs are kept, because it doesn't have much of a body. Its proboscis is also important because that's what it uses to suck the insides out of worms, jellyfish, sponges, and other soft body prey. Sounds delicious, I guess? Right now, all I can picture is like that one scene from The Lion King where Timon and Pumbaa are sucking the insides out of squishy bugs, and I'm pretty sure Simba and I are having the exact same facial reaction. For my brain's sake, it's highly unlikely for most of us to ever come across one of the giant spiders, since they only live in the oceans around the polar regions. Gigantism has been observed in a number of other Arctic and Antarctic species, leading biologists to consult a couple of theories that certain elements of the polar environment must be conducive to humongous body size. Over several hypotheses have been put forward, with some scientists claiming that large body size may have developed as an evolutionary trait to enable animals to withstand long periods of starvation during the winter, when resources tend to become, scarce in the polar regions. While others have suggested that some of these species may be somehow descended from creatures that invaded the Arctic and Antarctic from the deep sea, where high rates of gigantism have also been recorded. However, a recent study lends support to an entirely different theory, which revolves around the availability of oxygen in the polar oceans, since oxygen is more soluble in cold water than warm water. It has been suggested that this high availability of oxygen, coupled with the fact that low temperatures slow animals' metabolism down and reduce their need for oxygen, could facilitate their gigantism. And hey, they're not venomous, so overall, they're not as dangerous. But that's not gonna stop my fears.
In at number 3, a suspected UFO. In 2011, a group of Swedish divers discovered a mysterious object at the bottom of the Baltic Sea, which is a part of the Atlantic Ocean. The divers that were exploring the sea floor that came across the UFO-shaped object had their equipment stop working as they approached the object. Professional diver Stephen Hogenberg, who is part of the oceanic team, said that some of the team's cameras and satellite phones refused to work when directly above the object and would only work when they were at least 200 meters away from the so-called UFO. The Swedish diving team noted there was a 985-foot flattened out runway leading up to the object, implying that it skidded along the path before stopping. Member Dennis Asberg said, "I am 100% convinced and confident that we have found something that is very, very, very unique." Many of the divers were convinced that their finding was in fact a UFO, but some added theories that maybe the object could have been a meteorite or an asteroid, a volcano or a U-boat from the Cold War, but no one was really sure. The divers had returned to the site the next year to get a better look at the anomaly and had in fact found a second object near the first finding. They had taken a sonar image of the new finding due to mysterious electrical interference. It wasn't much of a clear image, and the group had only released the original finding image because the second finding was so blurry. With only a single blurry image and little information, many speculate that the object at the bottom of the Baltic Sea could in fact be a UFO, a portal into another world, or even an underwater Stonehenge. The theories received more attention when artist Hawk Vact had created a 3D interpretation of the mysterious object, which looks eerily similar to a UFO or something not of this world. On December 10, 2014, the website Earth We Are One actually published an article claiming a UFO shaped like a Millennium Falcon from Star Wars had been discovered at the bottom of the Baltic Sea and explained more about the dive and findings. We may never really know what this mysterious object truly is, and many believe it might be, but others believe it could be something else, but no one really knows. In at number 2, we have giant eyeball. In 2012, a giant eyeball was found by a beachcomber in Pompano Beach in Florida, and this discovery is baffling wildlife officials. The softball-sized eyeball was reported to the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission and then sent to the Fish and Wildlife Research Institute in St. Petersburg to be put on ice, so further analysis could be done to try and figure out what sea creature this eyeball had come from. Marine biologists will use genetic testing to try and solve this mystery and try and find an answer. When the picture came out of this mysterious eyeball, the internet went crazy, and the mystery eyeball soon went viral, and some have suggested that the eye came from a monster fish, a giant squid, or even a whale. Many people are leaning towards the eyeball is from a giant squid, but the spokeswoman for the Fish and Wildlife Research Institute, Carly Segelson, said they are leaning toward a different scenario. The primary suspect right now would be a large fish like a swordfish, a tuna, or some sort of deep water fish species. Heather Bracken-Grissom, an assistant professor in the marine science program at Florida International University in Miami, believed that this huge blue eyeball may have come from a deep sea squid or a large swordfish. The professor and her colleagues concluded that the eyeball's lens and pupil are similar in shape to that of a deep sea squid, and noted that a deep sea squid's eyeball can be as large as a soccer ball and can easily become dislodged. After the marine biologist's test came back, they were still left with not many answers of what creature this eyeball came from, but it was determined to have bone fragments around it, debunking the theory of it being from a giant squid. Many different parts of different sea creatures have washed up or have been discovered by divers, but soon determined by marine biologists to be a specific sea creature or species, but this eyeball continues to be a mystery. This story just proves that we know very little about the ocean and who or what is swimming down there, especially in the deepest depths of the sea. And finally, in at number 1, we have Icicle of Death, or better known as the icy finger of death. It creeps through the ocean's depth like a frozen eel, an eerie phenomenon known as brine icicles. Brinesicles are most commonly called the icicles of death. It freezes everything it touches. Only discovered in the 1960s, these things grow towards the sea floor from the base of the Arctic and Antarctica sea ice. This phenomenon happens when extremely cold brines sink to the bottom of the water, reaching warmer seawater below. The water around it flash freezes, creating a descending tube of ice known as a brinacle. Sometimes an underwater icicle reaches the seafloor, and when it does, a web of ice forms and spreads, entombing and freezing everything in its path, including any unlucky sea life such as a starfish and sea urchins. Andrew Thurber, professor at Oregon State University, an avid diver, had actually seen a brinacle bloom firsthand and stated, "They look like an upside-down cacti that are blown from glass, like something from Dr. Seuss's imagination. They're incredibly delicate and can break with only the slightest touch." The formation of a brinacle was first filmed in 2011 by producer Catherine Jeffs and cameraman Hugh Miller and Doug Anderson for the BBC series Frozen Planet. They can even create brine pools, which are called the Black Pool of Death, and are toxic to marine animals due to their high salinity and anoxic properties, which can lead to toxic shock and possibly death. Based on what scientists have learned so far, they believe life on Earth may have originated from these tentacles, and that they may even harbour conditions suitable for life to form on other planets and moons.